Hello and welcome to the EcoCast. On today's event, we'll be talking about modernizing and securing state, local, government, and educational institutions out there. This event is brought to you in partnership with our sponsors. On this event, you'll hear from experts at Rubrik, Rapid7, Unitrends, Mimecast, and Nutanix. We've got a great event lined up for you today. My name is David Davis, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. This event is produced by ActualTech Media, and we at ActualTech Media created the MegaCast and EcoCast event series to help educate IT professionals such as yourselves about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology, to help you learn about multiple solutions as quickly and efficiently as possible, and to help get all your questions answered. And as such, we want this to be an educational event, so I encourage you to check out the questions box. It's there on the left-hand side of your audience console. I can draw your attention to it now, and we'll be doing our best to cover every question that comes in with our expert presenters. We have dedicated Q&A sessions with each of our presenters after their 20-minute, roughly, presentation slot. So thank you so much again for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule. Now, before we jump into it, just a few things that you need to know about the event. I'll talk about our prizes. You might have heard about those in just a moment. I talked about the questions box there on the left-hand side of your audience console. Thank you for all the good morning and hello messages from across the United States and around the world. I'll also have a few questions for you out there in the audience. We'll be bringing up some poll questions during the event. So, of course, we appreciate your participation in those. We also want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly from the console on the bottom of your screen. The hashtag for today's presentation will be automatically appended, which is ATM EcoCast, and I encourage you to do that. Share the word about what we're doing here with these EcoCast and MegaCast events to your friends and family and colleagues out on social. And then finally, resources. In the Handouts tab, we've got links or PDF assets hand-selected by each of our presenters. So I encourage you to take a look at those, download them now. You can read them after the presentations. We have links from each of the presenters or PDFs, in some cases from each of the presenters, so make sure you check those out. The prizes for today's EcoCast are 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. You must be live in attendance to qualify for the prize drawings. I will be verbally announcing the prize winners periodically throughout the event. To be eligible, all prize winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 if you win, of course, and you have the option to make a donation to a selected charity. Full prize terms and conditions can be found there in the Handouts tab if you're looking for the legal prize terms. Now, ActualTech Media has been donating $500 to the Direct Relief charity for every MegaCast, EcoCast, and Summit event that we run. If you haven't heard of Direct Relief, they support frontline healthcare workers with critical medical supplies. So by supporting today's event, you are indirectly supporting this charity as well. And of course, we appreciate your support. The hashtag, like I said, for today's event is ATM EcoCast. You can follow ActualTech Media on Twitter. We are at ActualTech Media. The Twitter icon on the top right-hand side of your console up there in the bar where it says Modernizing and Securing State and Local Government and Education. You'll see the Twitter icon, our YouTube icon, and LinkedIn. Those are actually clickable icons up there, and they will take you to our respective social media pages. So feel free to follow ActualTech Media, and I am David M. Davis on Twitter as well. Feel free to follow me. You can subscribe to the ActualTech Media channels over on Facebook and the 10 on Tech podcast in the iTunes store. And we post all of our latest and greatest content on our LinkedIn page, so make sure that you follow us there. If you just choose one, I would choose LinkedIn. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's keynote presenter. That is Mr. Scott D. Lowe, CEO and co-founder at ActualTech Media. Before founding ActualTech Media, Scott was actually a CIO at an educational institution, a college, for quite a few years, and a consultant for many other colleges in the area of IT. And so I'm excited to have Scott on today to talk about his observations that he's been doing, his research and recommendations for state government, local government, and educational IT pros and decision makers. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Scott. Take it away.
Hi there, I'm Scott Lowe with ActualTech Media, and thank you for joining us for today's event. I want to talk about some observations and recommendations for state government, local government, and education IT pros and decision makers. A few weeks ago, we ran a survey of 300 to 400 IT pros, depending on the answer here. We had different people answer different numbers of questions, so somewhere between 300 and 400 people, and we wanted to get a sense of where you are. Obviously, this year has been disruptive for everyone, but probably no more than for IT in a lot of cases. IT was called on to do really not the impossible, but the very difficult, and you all excelled at the outcome that was needed. But we wanted to understand what this has meant. And so the first question we asked folks was, has the pandemic changed your company's IT priorities? Just 19% of you said that there was no change. That means 81% have said, yes, there was some kind of change. And the really big thing is that a full 9%, that's not insignificant. It's not a big number, but it's not insignificant, said that basically your old plan is gone. And 18% said that there were significant changes. In some way, shape, or form, all of you were impacted, whether it was professionally or personally. But from your organization's IT priorities, 81% of you said that, yes, there was some change. And so what does this mean? And what this means, change brings opportunity, but it also brings a need to make sure you've stayed current. And so it's more important than ever for IT pros to stay current with what's happening in the market. And that's one of the reasons you're probably here today, to learn about some of the new things that are on the market to help you do your job better and help your organization. But there's also significant opportunity ahead for you to help move your organization forward. With change, there's opportunity. There's an opportunity to rethink the way you've done things. And the phrase I hate more than anything is we've always done it that way. And this is an opportunity for IT pros to look at what they've done, what your organization has done forever, for as long as you can remember, and use that as an opportunity to start to rethink how business is done in your organizations. It sounds daunting, but it's actually doable. And it just takes some, out of the box thinking, some real planning, some real assessment of where you really are, and then ability to step back and look objectively at the organization and say, what can we do better? Now, that doesn't mean you have to look at the whole company. You can look at the company, you can look at your department, or you can look at just your domain and say, what can we do better? Pretend I've never been here and I'm walking into it brand new. What can we do better, more efficiently, less expensively, more effectively, in some way, shape, or form? One of the questions that always comes up when you start to think about doing more is, can we do more? Have we had staffing changes? And one of the questions we asked folks was, since the beginning of the year, has the size of your IT team changed? Now, for 60% of you, there was no change. And I'm going to go to the next slide. And that's probably good news. But if we look at, going back to that other slide for a second, we look at the folks that have had a change. So some have said, yes, we added some people. Some said we added a lot of people. 20% said they added a couple people, but 1% said they added a lot of people. If we look at the no's, though, basically we've let a couple of people go, or we've gone through one or more significant layoff rounds. 14% have let a few people go, but 6% have gone through significant layoff rounds. So even though we've seen about the same number percentage-wise of organizations grow and shrink, those that have shrunk appear to have shrunk more substantially than those that have grown. So that has put additional pressure on the remaining IT staff to coin a phrase, do more with less. I realize I didn't coin that, but it's the phrase that we always use when we are looking at what we have to do to assume the workloads of folks that have left. Now, at the same time, where we're doing work has also changed. And we wanted to find out from organizations, this was about less than a month ago that we asked these questions. And we wanted to find out what that has actually meant for workload changes since the pandemic started earlier this year. And just 8% of folks said that they are still in an office and they have to stay. That's a tiny number. And a full 28% say we're all at home and this is the way that it's going to be forever. And that is really becoming a very common refrain that we're hearing from our clients and from from organizations across the globe. That remote work, is one of those things that a lot of organizations didn't necessarily want to do, but they were forced to do it and found that in many cases it actually worked. And so 28% of our respondents in this survey said it's going to be the norm at our organization. 50% said some are back in the office and some are still at home, but they'll be coming back. So we don't know what that mix is going to look like next year. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to come back to the office, but some will still be home. And we also have the mix now where some people are back in the office, some people are at home. So there's still a mix of things going on, and we're going to see how that plays out over the next year. I would fully expect that 28% number to grow, though, as organizations realize that working from home has some significant benefits. Thank you very much for your attention here, and I hope you enjoy our EcoCast today.
All right, thank you, Scott. Great presentation, very insightful. We received some comments out there from the audience as well that they enjoyed the feedback and the status of Scott's research. And with that, I brought up a poll question, actually one of the questions that Scott shared the results from on his previous polling question that he asked. And so I'll pose the question to you out there in the audience. Has your company's IT priorities? And I'll share the results of this poll with you so you can see how you stack up with your peers who are on today's EcoCast. So I'll give everyone a moment to answer the poll. You can do that right there in the slides window. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that poll. Let me go ahead and share the results. And it looks like 47% just said a bit. Really, there have been some things that are delayed while we address the new needs, but really hasn't changed much at all. And if you combine that with not at all, really you're looking at about, 64% roughly. And then there's 25% that said quite a bit. Our plan is out the window, but we'll be back. And 9% said the old plan is gone. We had to start fresh. Things have totally changed. So thank you for answering that. I hope that you found the results interesting as I did. And then last poll question before I introduce you to our first expert presenter on the event today. The poll question on the screen is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company or your state, local, government, educational institution? We would like to hear your feedback and get some idea of, kind of what your priorities are when it comes to updating existing solutions. It may be in the data center or in the cloud, and or adding completely new solutions. Maybe there's a new project. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that poll. And with that, it's time to get started. I'm excited to introduce our first presenter. That is Mr. Tim Wallace, Senior Solutions Marketing Manager for the Public Sector at Nutanix. Tim, are you there?
I'm here, thank you.
Thanks for being on, Tim. Take it away.
Thanks. Hi, and thank you everyone for joining me today and giving me a few minutes to talk about Nutanix and what we're doing to help modernize and secure state local education environments. I did want to just put a safe harbor statement in here. We had our global user conference last week, and I have a few new data points that are sprinkled into my presentation. So I just wanted to make sure that I will be mentioning a few future plans as well. But before I get really into the meat of this, I wanted to, when we talk about modernization, I always think it's helpful to kind of look at where we came from to help decide where we're going. And looking back at technology and innovations in technology, when you look back at very early computers that were built with vacuum tubes, and then technology allowed us to move to transistors and then to integrated circuits and then systems on a chip. And each step of the way of that technology innovation curve, the technology allowed us to get smaller, faster, and more reliable, and in many ways cheaper. Sometimes the cost of a new technology doesn't start out being cheaper, but because of the reliability and what you can do with it, you do recognize those savings. So I also want to look back just in this market for what's been our year in 2020. We started the year, ransomware and malware were big in the news, kind of got bumped off the headlines with coronavirus and the pandemic, but still around. And then we've seen still this week locally here, the school system got hit with ransomware, and it's a daily thing. So security is still front and center. And also natural disasters, fires, hurricanes are impacting our citizens and impact how we serve those citizens through IT. All of those things impact budgets, impact both revenues for future budgets, but also costs. As companies and organizations had to flip around to support telework, those were perhaps unplanned expenses. So all impacts. For us, IT changed overnight back in the middle of March, where we went to full-scale telework and closed our offices. But for many organizations, they saw the same thing, and it wasn't just the end users, but the IT staffs also had to, change their operations to work in a new normal of working from home with perhaps limited access to data centers. Now, for us, this is an article you can click on after when you get these slides to look at the data here. But this is our CEO's response to the pandemic and how preparation really helped us overcome the challenges. For me, I work out in a office outside of Washington D.C., so I'm always remote and used to it. But for our developers and our IT staffs, particularly headquarters IT staffs, this was a change in mentality, and we certainly had a few challenges. We found that our VPN services weren't quite ready for the scale that we had to go to, but Wendy talks about it, and he talks about the planning and preparation that goes into it. There's a comment around, I guess, back in World War II, they talk about plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And I think we saw that with the pandemic. Now, looking ahead to where modernization is going to go in a post-COVID world, something that I expect to see that this change in, I guess, perspective from cloud first to cloud smart. But just to back up a little bit on that, cloud first really entered our lexicon about 10 years ago when the federal CIO at the time, Vivek Kundra, established a policy for federal IT to really incent them to modernize and consolidate data centers and reduce the cost of IT across federal government. And the incentive was to really look at cloud architectures, cloud as an architecture, not necessarily a product, but as a architectural method of deploying IT as the modern way of thinking and the desired way of thinking. Now, over time, the federal organizations found that they didn't always get the results they expected. Simply moving to cloud as a first choice sometimes resulted in unexpected cost. They found that some applications weren't really geared toward the cloud as well. And some organizations actually had to repatriate. Either they ran into a security problem or they ran into performance problems with their legacy applications. So about a year ago, the policy at the federal levels changed from cloud first to cloud smart to be more pragmatic about moving to cloud. And they gave guidance to federal IT organizations on how to rationalize your applications in moving to cloud. So it's a different perspective, but I think one that's timely. In looking ahead, certainly cloud is going to be something that we would expect in really a multi-cloud world. Each of the public cloud providers offer different types of services and different approaches to how they deliver services, and we think there's certainly going to be room for all of those in the post-pandemic world, and certainly a place for private cloud as well. So your enterprise cloud effectively becomes a combination of those public and private clouds. Now, when we look at comparing public and private, certainly public clouds have advantages. Rapid time to market, you can, with a few clicks, you can deploy an application into the public cloud or provision and deploy it. You get that utility model of fractional consumption that you only pay for what you use, and the expectation that the underlying infrastructure will be updated on a regular basis. And then that kind of one-click or one-click-ish simplicity of managing that environment. Whereas on the private cloud side, you have a known environment with legacy apps. You know how they work. They may not be well suited toward moving some of those application environments to a cloud-native public cloud environment. You also understand the cost models, and if you're looking at capital expenses versus operating expenses, you may see that you have certain advantages in the private cloud on predictable costs without the overhead that you might pay for a public cloud service. You may have regulatory concerns, and you may have some, more control of security needs. But the combination of the two really gives you some real distinct advantages for elasticity and agility. You can run in a private cloud perhaps when your workloads are well understood, but if you have a period where you have extreme demand, public cloud gives you the ability to burst workloads up into that cloud. When we had the, everybody went to telework, public cloud offered the scale and the agility to switch workloads into that public cloud. Now, we also saw too that public cloud wasn't this infinite set of resources too, so there were some anecdotal stories of some limits in the public cloud side. Also in the post-COVID world, there's going to be a need for security. We've seen that. We mentioned the ransomware and malware issues earlier on in this presentation, but implementation of a zero trust model throughout the organization, as the walls of the data center, the walls of the enterprise kind of dissolve and people are working from home or working on premise, there's a need to really implement zero trust to protect all aspects of the organization. There's also need for automation. Certainly the lights out data centers rely on automation, and I think some of the stats that Scott shared earlier with the polling around just what the nature of IT staffing looks like now and in the future. Automation really helps IT staff scale their operations. It also helps security enterprise as well by being able to do routine tasks in a standardized manner. There's a need for resiliency always on, particularly if you have people working from home, they're working maybe different hours. So resilience is ultimately important. Now, looking at how Nutanix approaches these kind of challenges, first of all, let's talk about hyperconvergence and hyperconverged infrastructure. We were a pioneer in this space. And on the left side of the screen, you see kind of what we refer to as a typical three-tier legacy architecture, where you have a compute layer and then a storage layer, storage area networks connected through high-speed network switches. And this is, the technology supported this as a mechanism of scaling data center capabilities at the time. But there's a lot of complexity here and a lot of need for specialization. Also, challenges of upgrading one part of it without impacting other parts of the environment. Virtualization certainly played a big part in this to at least abstract the application layers from the underlying hardware infrastructure. Now, what we do with hyperconvergence is we rationalize compute, networking, and storage into a single platform, much like we rationalize transistors and integrated circuits into a system on a chip. We put that in a single Nutanix node, and then arrange those into a cluster of nodes that provide the resilience and high availability across your compute environment. Structurally, it's really the same. It's really kind of a hyper-converged model of that more complex environment. The underlying infrastructure provides the locality of data to the applications that uses the intelligence and artificial intelligence and machine learning to make sure the data is closest to where the application is running, but also gives you the ability to replicate and clone environments that eliminate single points of failure. Case in point, San Mateo County has been a long-time customer of Nutanix. They were faced with aging storage and server infrastructure and needed a refresh. They looked at Nutanix as a way to really modernize their environment and to scale. So with that reduced footprint, they started with a small cluster, but now they have hundreds of nodes running thousands of VMs. They really work in an interesting model because half of their county is, Silicon Valley, high tech. The other half of their county is very rural. So they have to support multiple citizen environments, and they do that with hyper-converged infrastructure. They also took the approach of looking at the money, the total cost of ownership, and looking at how they were able to reduce their capital expenses and then the impact on staffing hours and staff time to recognize their savings. I have to speed up or I won't get through this presentation, so I'm going to keep moving on here a little bit. One thing that you get with that hyper-converged infrastructure is simplicity of operation and a common management interface. Here, just a few examples of some of our customers. The guy on the lower right, I think, is from Australia. This was a couple of years ago while he was attending a Nutanix user conference in Las Vegas. Took a little side trip, but while he was up in the chopper, he actually upgraded his infrastructure that was half a world away. Market leadership, we're recognized by Gartner and Forrester as a perennial leader in this space. So the next step after you modernize your infrastructure is to really start operating in more of a cloud model. So modernizing the infrastructure is the first step, but doesn't quite get you to that cloud smart model. The next step is how do you deploy applications? And with our Calm application lifecycle management technology, we allow developers to manage how they deploy applications and update them, provision those applications. That gives you the ability to really create a marketplace so that your users can select the applications that they need, and the system can automatically provision that. We provide blueprints and the ability to extend blueprints for that to basically serve up your applications and turn your IT resources into more of a service-oriented approach. Frame is our desktop as a service technology. VDI was one of our first big use cases for Nutanix and HCI. Most recently, we've also embraced a cloud-based desktop as a service. Very simple to pick your infrastructure, pick your cloud, authorize your users, bring in your authorization mechanisms, load up your apps, determine what kind of file system storage you're going to use, and then provide it to users. This was recently, back in the springtime, we achieved FedRAMP authorization for this platform, as well as another technology I'll get to in a minute. But I did want to mention, like Maryland Lottery was an existing customer in Nutanix. They had already modernized their data center and experienced a savings of deployment time and reduction in management. But back in March, when everybody was affected by the pandemic and had to move to telework, they were able to. They came to us and asked about our Frame product. And actually, the procurement took a few more days than anything else. We had a couple meetings with them to scope out their need and kind of size what they wanted. But this is a subscription service, so they're very quickly able to determine what they wanted, procure those licenses, and it only took a couple of days to get those up and running in the cloud to enable their workers. The great thing about this is we moved to more subscription-oriented selling, is that customers aren't locked into long-term licensing. Now, Creighton University also did that on the education side. They were an existing Frame customer, but they were able to quickly scale that up as they moved their campus to more remote learning. And same thing for Alabama A&M. Now, what's interesting here, and you can look at these case studies on our Nutanix.com website if you want to get more information, but one thing about Alabama and A&M that I thought was interesting is they're using their private cloud that they built with Nutanix to extend that into a community cloud to service other historically Black colleges and universities. I'm going to move past the files and objects and consolidated storage. Just to say that we have solutions to extend that for block storage, for databases, user files with NFS and traditional user storage, and as well as object-based storage, S3 storage for big data, and perhaps doing backups with immutable storage. And I'm going to move through the case studies. Just interesting that we have public safety case studies where they're doing video surveillance data, video data management, as well as computer-aided dispatch and records management on that. So very rigorous use cases that they're running on Nutanix. Now, when we look at remote work and the security aspects, Nutanix starts with a hardened infrastructure. We have a defense in depth design that starts implementing that zero trust model throughout the operating environment. But in addition, we've extended that for remote users supporting, and these new stars on the slide kind of indicate things that were announced just last week at our user conference, but protecting those virtual Windows desktops with Microsoft VBS and Credential Guard. We have a technology called Flow that does microsegmentation that creates fine-grained abilities to quarantine and firewall individual virtual machines and components within the network and within the operating environment. And then, of course, with data security, we support data at rest encryption and key management across the environment. And we're extending that with more in-depth security operations. So when you look at something like ransomware, it's important to kind of look at the three phases: preventing, detecting, and recovering. And as I see that I'm running out of time here, I want to just kind of move past that. We can give you more information on how we approach ransomware. But the idea is basically, zero trust and prevention. Detecting, we use files analytics and Flow to kind of detect and isolate threats. And then on the recovery side, depending strongly on our ability to use DR and backups to support that resilience. Now, I'm going to skip through some of these. We have some really great case studies here, but I did want to talk about a couple of final things. SiteBeam is our multi-cloud cost governance tool. As you're looking to move to cloud, SiteBeam gives you great data into where your spending is in the cloud. It also helps support shared services in a way that if you want to do chargebacks, you can do that with SiteBeam. And I think finally I wanted to talk about a new announcement that we made right before our user conference .next to rationalize public and private clouds with license portability and being able to really hyperconverge public and private clouds, and that's Nutanix clusters. Basically, Nutanix clusters allows you to take an on-premise Nutanix instance and move that into the public cloud. We initially announced that on Amazon Web Services earlier this summer, and most recently at .next user conference, we announced the move to the support for Microsoft Azure that will be coming later at the end of the year, early next year. So this has a unified management plane across the environment, and you can use the same Prism management console to manage your Nutanix-based resources, whether they are in the private cloud or public cloud, and gives you great mobility between those environments. Just finally, I wanted to let you guys know that all of our conference materials from our recent .next are available on demand, so you can go back and get more information on some of the topics I've mentioned through the Nutanix .next portal. I have the website here, and also we have the ability to test drive as well, so you can get a guided walkthrough of the Nutanix environment. So I have a question here. I think I just wanted to let you guys know, appreciate your time. But Steve asked, how do you envision individual zero trust initiatives affecting your multi-cloud management solution? So I think the difficulty is, kind of rationalizing that. So I think when you're looking at security, it's important to really look at a holistic view of that. So not necessarily having an individual initiatives, but looking at how well the system supports that, and how do you implement things to isolate and protect the different assets of your system. I think I'd have to think through that a little bit more, Stephen, so I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards to give you a little bit more detail there.
Yeah, great presentation, Tim. I really enjoyed that. I do have some other questions here for you. I've just brought up a poll question for everyone out there in the audience. I want to call your attention to what additional information would you like about the Nutanix solution, and we'll leave that up while we do a few more questions here. Tim, first off, congratulations on the launch of Nutanix clusters. It's really cool. They're asking, is that available in AWS GovCloud?
So it's generally available on AWS today. Our target is that it will be available in GovCloud for early access in October, and we hope to make it generally available in December.
Nice. And is it true that with AWS or Nutanix clusters on AWS, you don't have to have Nutanix on premises to use that? Is that true? That's true. And in fact, I saw a thread today that was interesting because usually at least I think about someone moving from private cloud into a public cloud. And I saw a discussion today that you could perhaps you actually start in the public cloud, run a Nutanix cluster in that public cloud, and that might help you size your environment, and then you can make the determination if it runs best in that public environment, or if you need to then move back into the private environment. But the great thing about the clusters solution is that you have license portability, so you can move those licenses from that AWS instance into your private cloud without mucking with your licensing. Oh, very cool. I like that. That's interesting. And then next question here, they're asking about FedRAMP. How does that apply to state and local? Well, so FedRAMP's oftentimes thought of as more of a federal standard and a security standard to make sure that the security aspects of a particular offering, a cloud offering, have been vetted for security. But we're seeing more and more states interested in it. In fact, the head of the FedRAMP program grew up next door to me, so I've spoken to her a few times about the state and local side, and it's open to state and local agencies if they want to use FedRAMP. It helps perhaps give them the good housekeeping seal of approval to know that the product has been properly vetted for the security issues that might come up. It gives them that added benefit. So it's certainly a consideration for some state agencies if they want to look at that level of security in running in that kind of environment. And our clusters product, right now our frame and beam products have been FedRAMP certified at a moderate level, which is about 80 or 90% of the use cases that we see for FedRAMP in government agencies. And then our clusters product is on tap to go through FedRAMP accreditation sometime the first half of next year. Excellent. And then there's another question here that came in from John. He's asking, I think you said there are plans to release Nutanix clusters on Azure. Is that right? Yeah, on Azure,
it was announced last week at our .next conference. We'll expect to have a preview of that in December, and general availability sometime after their first of the year, at least in the first half of next year for Azure.
Excellent. And then what about running containers and Kubernetes on Nutanix? Is that possible?
It's something that I didn't get to. I probably didn't do really good time management for this, but Kubernetes, we have a solution for, we certainly support running Kubernetes containers, but we have a product called Carbon that eases the management. So if your developers have started working with Kubernetes, know that sometimes the management of that can get very complex. We try to simplify that with Carbon. And there were a number of announcements I haven't completely digested last week from our .next conference on that, but we certainly do support it.
Excellent. All right. Well, it looks like we've covered all the questions that have come in, and that's all the time we have for Q&A. But a really great presentation, Tim. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, it's time to keep our EcoCast moving here. We have our next presenter lined up, and I'm excited to introduce Mike Dines, a Senior Security Solutions Engineer at Rapid7. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Take it away.
Sure. So what I'll be talking about today is going over Rapid7's Insight Cloud platform, talking about some of the solutions that are tied into that, sort of how we're helping with some of the modern infrastructure with cloud building, migration, what we're doing with the products that we've been sort of developing for years, how we're putting them into that platform, and assisting, obviously, with what state, local government, and some of the education systems are doing. So I guess for a quick introduction of myself, I've been with Rapid7 for going on about 5 years now. I started with the federal team to work largely with DoD customers, a lot of compliance, especially around FedRAMP and some of the different pieces that were going on there. In addition to that, I've worked with a lot of the compliance frameworks that go with our solutions, so NIST, CIS, FedRAMP, CMMC, PCI, and a number of others as well. What we're seeing today, and this is sort of the trend of both 2020 especially, and also the trend that we've sort of seen growing over the last few years, is that teams are being asked to do more with less. And when we say that, what we mean is really two different things. So when we say that teams are being asked to do more, the first thing they're being asked to do is obviously visibility into their remote workforce, visibility into the SaaS and cloud solutions that they have out there, especially now with everybody working remotely, a lot of people connecting in through VPN and connecting in from their homes and in various other places. Some of the other challenges is being able to track what we consider those ephemeral assets. So assets that aren't necessarily always connected into the network, maybe ones that join for limited periods of time, or ones that are just sort of floating out there that maybe haven't been assessed, or you're not necessarily sure with what you're seeing there. And then in addition to that, being able to secure some of the newer technologies that have been growing, your containers, cloud infrastructure, whether it's AWS, whether it's Azure, whether it's Google, being able to secure those image pipelines, some of your modern web applications, and then also working with serverless infrastructure, which is becoming more and more popular. And some of the key factors that you hear kind of discussed when you're going over all these topics is, okay, well, you need defense in depth, you need integrations with a lot of the technologies that you're working with, you need to set up clear and repeatable processes, and get support for any of the new technology that you may be bringing in over time to support these various things. And then the second half of that is obviously doing all of this with less, and whether that means a smaller budget, whether that means a smaller headcount. And a lot of the times you're working with multiple different tools, whether it's 10, whether it's 15. You just don't have time to kind of go to each of these, go to each dashboard, figure out what's going on, and pull all of that data together. And you don't have the time to manage on-prem servers, on-prem infrastructure to go along with all of this. And as with before, some of the key factors we're talking about here is once again, having a well-defined process and some automation built on that, unifying a lot of this data, and hosting what you have in the cloud. So to talk about our platform itself, so the Insight platform is something that we've been building for several years now, which we wanted to be able to provide visibility through some unified data collection, analytics, and automation for all of our Insight products on the platform. This leverages our unified Rapid7 agent, so the agent is used for multiple technologies across the platform. It's a single sign-on to access all of your tools. And there's several different technologies that are kind of baked into the platform today. So first of all, you've got your vulnerability management with our Insight VM Vulnerability Management Suite. That was kind of Rapid7's flagship product. We've been doing vulnerability management for, I want to say, almost 25 years now. And we've kind of expanded that from an on-prem solution with Nexpose to Insight VM with the addition of dashboards, remediation projects, agent, and a number of other things. The next piece is your application security, which is our Insight AppSec tool. So you've got, that's our DAS web application scanner, so giving you some visibility into your software development lifecycle, giving you better control over some of the remediation as your applications are going from development to production. Recent acquisition for us is our DivvyCloud platform, so giving you the ability to do cloud compliance assessments and also visibility across multiple cloud environments, regardless of what you happen to be using. You've got our detection and response with our Insight IDR, and that gives you both a user behavior analytics perspective on anything that may be going on, both from a user and a workstation perspective. And then you've also got the attacker behavior analytics side through whether it's a malicious process running on those systems, whether it's something that we've discovered that's come in through maybe a phishing email or something like that, to give you some additional visibility into kind of what your attack surface is and what we see happening on the network. And then the final piece of that is our orchestration automation, our SOAR solution, InsightConnect. And that kind of takes the disparate technologies that you have in the environment and pulls those together. So whether that's a Rapid7 solution, whether it's some of the other third-party technologies you're using, taking a lot of that manual process out of what you're doing and giving you some additional control to go ahead and build out workflows, build out automations, remove some of those menial tasks from sort of the day-to-day process. And then the final two pieces that sort of contribute to this, one being our services. So almost all of our technologies do have a managed service component that can be attached to them. So if you do have a smaller or limited team, we do have the ability to manage those for you. We also do have security consulting services. We have pen test services and a number of other things as well that sort of help build out that program. And then we also have the research that's attached and kind of built into the heart of all of our technologies. So Rapid7 itself is part of the Cyber Threat Alliance. We have our Project Heisenberg, which is our global network of honeypots. We've got Project Sonar, which is our scanning of the public-facing internet, and a number of other things that are included in that as well. To give a breakdown of sort of each of the technologies, so we'll start with Insight VM. As I mentioned, vulnerability management was sort of our flagship technology. That's our vulnerability management solution. And there's a couple things that we've really focused on with the technology. One is giving you the ability to scan and assess new assets pretty much immediately as soon as they join the network. So we have connectors that go out to both AWS and Azure. We have the ability to set up dynamic connections with various services in the environment, things like DHCP, vSphere, to make sure that as soon as a network is, or an asset is joining the network or something connects in, that you have immediate visibility into what is going on with that. We've also given you the ability to do some cloud configuration assessment with AWS. So checking those benchmarks, make sure that there's no bad firewall rules or anything that's attached to that environment that you've built out. The tool also does have the ability to do some container risk assessment, so we can plug into a lot of your common container technologies, so Docker, Key, Google, AWS, and a number of other ones, to do some image assessment. So prior to rollout of these images across your network, or as you're building these things out, we can do some baseline assessment to tell you if we see any potential vulnerabilities, any weaknesses sitting on those images, especially to help with those large development environments as you're kind of rolling these images out and pushing these to multiple machines. And then one thing that's always been is doing risk-based prioritization. So taking a lot of the data that you're seeing and giving some additional context on top of that. So rather than just handing you a list of CVSS and saying, well, here's the data, figure it out, we've always wanted to build some additional attacker context and metrics on top of that. So giving you the ability to see what active exploits or malware kits are available for vulnerabilities that we found. Giving you the ability to apply context. So is this high-risk infrastructure for you? Is it a mission target? Is it a server? What exactly is it that we're looking at? And then taking that and prioritizing that data as far as what's being done with remediation, which is sort of built into the remediation projects within InsightVM. So you can take a remediation project, say, okay, well, these are the systems that we want to focus on, and here's a list of the vulnerabilities that we should be patching first to focus on that information. And then we've also built out things like dashboards. So reports are obviously great, but if you just need immediately visibility into what's happening, you can go and you can look at the dashboard. You can see a snapshot of what's been found, a breakdown of your environment to get a lot of good information that can also be shared with other users as well. The next tool that we're talking about is InsightIDR. So that's our user behavior analytics platform. And as we were talking about before, so InsightIDR does share an agent with InsightVM. So if you're leveraging one technology, you've already got a piece installed for the next one when you go to spin it up. And there's really a couple main things that we were looking to focus on with InsightIDR. One is to obviously give you visibility and response for remote workers, especially now when that's mostly what people are doing. A lot of the workforce is remote. So we have the ability to pull in various data sources, whether it be VPN, whether it be Office 365, whether it be a lot of the different firewall data that we're connecting into the environment. We're going to have full visibility into what's going on with them and whether we see any unusual activity from those users as you're going about your day-to-day. We also have cloud coverage. So I mentioned Office 365. We can plug into things like Azure, Google Apps, Salesforce, a number of different things to get some visibility into a lot of the cloud technologies that you may be using in your environment as an additional data feed. And the data that we're providing with InsightIDR is sort of broken out into two different types of coverage. So you've got your user behavior analytics, which is generally your more common things. So those are things like brute force attempts on the network. Those are things like lateral movement from a compromised account, multiple country authentication. So maybe you see someone logging on from the US, and then 2 minutes later you see them logging on from Europe or whatever the case may be. And then the second half of that is your attacker behavior analytics. And those focus on things like malicious processes that we may see running on those systems. Maybe someone opened a phishing email, they clicked a link, it downloaded a PowerShell script or something like that, and suddenly we see a malicious process running on that system. So we're giving you the ability to track that data, and then leveraging the agent and some of the hooks that we have into Active Directory and other things. We also give you the ability to respond to those. So quarantining assets that you believe may have been compromised, killing malicious processes, and also deprovisioning users that you believe may have been compromised by whatever we happen to see running on that system. And then as far as the rules and some of the intelligence that goes into this, I already talked a little bit about it, but obviously we're pulling in the data from that Project Heisenberg, from what we see a lot of the attacker trends month to month. So what do we see attackers targeting? What seems to be the most popular exploit this particular month? We also have a lot of community threat feeds. So in addition to the data that we're curating, we allow you to plug into various things like, for example, the SANS Top 100 malicious IPs, various darknet feeds for compromised accounts, compromised credentials, things like that, and a number of other things to give you some additional data. And then a lot of our rules and pieces that are attached to both the user behavior and the attacker behavior analytics side are pre-configured. So you don't have to build out all the rules for the tool. You don't have to spend time breaking out all the information, figuring out what you want to alert on. We have all that data pre-configured for you, so you can just set it up and let it run. Next piece is DivvyCloud. So DivvyCloud we wanted to pull in to give you the ability to do some configuration compliance assessment across your cloud environment. And one of the big things with DivvyCloud is it gives you visibility across multiple cloud platforms. So what we see from our customers is they're not always deployed into just a single environment. They may have a production environment in AWS, some development in Azure, maybe a separate application environment on the Google Cloud platform. So we wanted to make sure that they had visibility across those environments, which you don't see with a lot of the competitive products. We also wanted to give them the ability to build out a lot of automation, so especially with the remediation process. So making sure that whatever is going on with your cloud configuration is automatically complying with whatever standard has been set. And then we also kind of make it flexible. So we want to give you the ability to build out custom automation feeds, whether that's tying into Slack, whether that's tying into tools like Microsoft Teams or different things, to give you some additional controls over how you're managing that process and what you're seeing as far as those different data feeds. The next tool is our InsightAppSec platform. So InsightAppSec is our DAST web application scanning tool. We wanted to create that and sort of build that out to give our customers some additional control over what they're seeing from their web application environment. So we are obviously always really good on the vulnerability management side, but we wanted to give more control over the software development lifecycle, more control to the developers themselves as they were sort of going through and looking through some of that data. So what you can do with this is the tool is designed to sort of integrate regardless of where you're sitting with that development lifecycle. So whether you're just starting out pulling in tools to do some assessment of these web applications, whether you're kind of mature in the process, you've already got some solutions in place, and you're just looking for maybe a little bit more visibility and control, we're designed to give you some access to that. So we can work with a lot of your modern frameworks. So whether we're scanning APIs, whether we're scanning single-page applications, whether we're working with different authentication methods, and we're pretty flexible regardless of what authentication you happen to be using on your application. So we can do your simple form authentication. We can do bootstrapping if you have CAPTCHAs or one-time authentications attached to those applications themselves. We can also do macro authentication and also import SSL certificates and different things to make sure that regardless of what you have out there, we can authenticate, we can give you the appropriate visibility. And one thing we've also done is built in what we call our attack replay tool. So giving you the ability to assess remediations to your applications without having to run an entire scan of the application again. So as developers go out, as they test remediations, as they make changes to the code, being able to take a snapshot and test that one particular vulnerability rather than doing a full scan again. And one that gives more control to the developers themselves, and it also gives the ability to cut down time for that remediation process. Because obviously applications a lot of the time is going to be a process. It's going to be something that you need to test a few things before you figure out what exactly needs to be done. And then the final piece is our InsightConnect SOAR automation tool. And one, this is sort of tied into our existing products. So we have some automation built into InsightVM with the ability to do some remediation through SCCM and BigFix, the ability to do some network monitoring through Cisco ICE, Carbon Black, Palo Alto. It's also built into InsightIDR with our ability to quarantine assets and a number of different things. And then the tool also exists as a standalone to give you the ability to build out workflows with some of your existing security infrastructure. So the ability to automate some of the tasks that you have going on through various solutions. So maybe an automated response as you see a phishing email come in, or maybe some of the manual processes that you go through with some of the solutions today. We want to give you the ability to sort of kick off a workflow as part of that investigation and contain things without having to go through and manually take each of those steps yourself. We also wanted to give our customers the ability to build out those integrations without needing specific coding knowledge or specific experience. So the workflows are very easy to work with. There's a very simple chain system that allows you to say, okay, well, here's the event, here's how we want to respond to it, here's the different pieces that are going to be attached to that chain to give us better control over that. And then we also wanted to give the ability to make everything go through some of the automated solutions that you have rather than just sending out an email or whatever the case may be to get visibility into that. So giving you the ability to go through Slack, Microsoft Teams, and allowing you to respond to incidents that are reported there. So seeing some of that data come through the feed, giving you the ability to make a single click in Slack and say, okay, well, this is how I want to respond to this particular workflow. This is the step we should be taking, so on and so forth. That's kind of the overview. So I guess if we have any questions at this point, we can jump into those.
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation. We do have some questions for you, Mike. While we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there in the audience that says, what additional information would you like about Rapid7? And we'll leave that up there while we take some Q&A. I do see a question here, first one from Stephen. He's asking if there's any integration between Rapid7 and Splunk.
Yeah, so there's actually, that's largely on the InsightVM side, but there is actually a Rapid7 app in the Splunk store, which allows you to pull over some dashboards. It allows you to automatically connect into your console, get some visibility into what vulnerability information you have, pull over a lot of the metrics and different things. So yes, there's actually one that's managed both by us and one that's sitting in the Splunk app store itself.
Very nice. All right. Next question, can you deploy the Insight agent remotely?
Yes. So there's a couple different ways you can deploy it. Obviously, you can just simply roll it out to a workstation, but it's pretty friendly with a lot of your mass deployment techniques. So you can deploy it through SCCM, you can deploy it through BigFix, really whatever solution you happen to be using for that. It plays pretty well with. So it can be rolled out remotely, it can be rolled out locally. You can deploy it in your AWS or whatever cloud environment you have out there for sure.
Excellent. And then next question, they're asking about reporting capabilities. What's offered in the Insight platform?
Yeah, so the big reason we've built out the Insight platform is to take a lot of the tedium out of working with different products and solutions. So the Insight platform is designed to give you immediately visibility into the data you need. So a lot of the reporting through it is through dashboards and pieces that you have accessibility to immediately. So whether you need to see from InsightVM what's happening with your vulnerability management, you can pull up your dashboards around what vulnerabilities, what exploits are sitting out in your environment, or whether you need some visibility into the environment from Insight IDR, then you can then pull up that dashboard. You've got your ingress map, you've got your alerts, you've got different things. And that's all at a snapshot, so you don't have to dig in, you don't have to find that information. Those are things that you can access right from the platform itself.
Very nice. I know that could be very helpful to a lot of organizations out there. And next question is about cloud migration. Do you have any advice to give organizations out there who've started migrating or maybe getting ready to double down and make a push to do a cloud migration?
I think the main piece of advice for organizations that are just looking to start the migration or maybe they've already begun the process and they're kind of in early stages is just take some time to figure out what needs to be secured, because what we see with a lot of the cloud migrations is everything sort of deployed at once, things sort of get lost in the works, and then you have a big infrastructure out there that, one, you don't know how it's being secured, and you don't necessarily know what's being out there. So take the time to figure out, okay, where is our critical infrastructure going to be for this? What do we need to secure? Which area should we focus on as far as tools that we're pulling in or any analytics that we're pulling from this platform itself? I think that's always the best first step to that.
Okay, solid advice. Thank you. And then any other general advice when it comes to just cloud security?
Usually the best piece of general advice is to kind of look at what you're doing for the platform and say, okay, well, what compliance do we want to focus on? And that's a lot of the conversations that we have with our customers. They've sort of picked a compliance framework for what they're looking to do, whether that be something common like NIST, whether we're talking CIS, whether you're looking to apply to certain compliance frameworks like maybe something more stringent like FedRAMP or CMMC. To sort of take it, because that's always how you want to build out the security for your platform. Based on that compliance, you want to figure out what tools you need to bring in. So whether you need to be starting with a vulnerability management solution, whether you need to be starting with an analytics platform, whether you need to do some scanning on the web applications that you have sitting out on that platform, that's really going to determine where you need to focus and what tools you need to be bringing in first is just figuring out that initial compliance focus for what you're doing.
Excellent. And so if people want to get started with the Rapid7 and the Insight platform, what do you recommend? What's the easiest way to do that?
So we have a trial link, which with our slides there. So the easiest is to just go to rapid7.com, depending on what technology you're looking for. We offer 30-day trials for pretty much all of our solutions. Once you're signed up, we'll connect you with an engineer, whoever you need to get set up, sort of run through the process, and get you going. We try to make everything as easy and painless as possible to set up. So we've got all the documentation, we've got resources accessible for you to get things up and rolling.
Very nice. Yeah, sounds super easy to do. Again, really great presentation, really cool product. Thank you so much for being on the event today, Mike.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having us.
And thank you to Rapid7. Like Mike said, visit the website. You can sign up for a free trial yourself. Also, don't forget about the handout that's there in the Handouts tab. It's on Secure Advancement with Rapid7. You can download that and read it after today's presentation. And it's now time for our first Amazon $500 gift card drawing. That's going out to Carlton McAdams from South Carolina. Congratulations, Carlton McAdams from South Carolina. Still 2 more gift cards to give out on the presentation today, so make sure you stay tuned. It is time now for our next presenter. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Adam Margett, Technical Specialist at Unitrends. Adam, great to have you. Take it away.
Hey, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. Welcome. A good afternoon, good morning to wherever it is that you're dialed in from. Hopefully you are enjoying the EcoCast event so far. My name is Adam Margett. I'm a technical specialist here with Unitrends, and I will be your host for the Unitrends portion of the event here today as we continue to discuss modernizing and securing IT infrastructure across SLED environments. Unitrends has an extensive history in the data backup and disaster recovery space with a little over 3 decades of experience. We're very proud of our 30,000 plus customers who form a great community of users across the globe, but really key to our operations in addition to the local backup and recovery capabilities that we provide with our appliances, our dedicated purpose-built cloud services. We have a lot of users in the SLED space taking advantage of the Unitrends Cloud. It is a proprietary offering. It is compliant with a number of major industry regulations, and we do offer cloud services in a number of countries across the globe, in the US, in Canada, the UK, and Germany, and we even serve APAC through our data center in Australia. But really key to our users' experience is a holistic support experience through the local hardware, software, and cloud services, all being supported and served by the Unitrends staff. They operate 24/7 by 365 right here out of Columbia, South Carolina, here in the USA. And I think that that's led to a really satisfactory experience for our end users, that you don't have that finger pointing that can occur when you've kind of stitched together multiple vendors. We're taking operation and onus for the entire data recovery and business continuity solution stack. In the abstract for today's event, I thought the folks at ActualTech did a really great job when they talk about kind of maximizing the investment in your infrastructure and a number of key benefits that, especially in SLED, are really key here today. The first of those is efficiency. And at Unitrends, we're automating a lot of what had traditionally been more menial or labor-intensive tasks, such as application-level DR testing, the proactive monitoring of hardware to reduce or get in front of potential drive or component-related failures, as well as monitoring the production environment as well, especially if you're in a Windows shop. You're familiar, I'm sure, with VSS services and the VSS writers, essential to the backup process. No vendor is immune, but every vendor can be hamstrung by VSS writers in hung states or failed services where you thought they maybe were running. It can create backup issues. We're going to get in front of those and ensure that every time we go to take a clean backup, the production environment is quiesced properly, the services are running, and we're taking those consistent backups that are ultimately going to be recoverable. Agility was really the second characteristic that they had called out, and we want to reduce the number of clicks and overall simplify your experience when managing the solution. Our customers love our SLA policy engine. It's a two-step wizard to create schedules and start creating backup policies based on the RPO, whether you have a 5 or a 15-minute RPO, or maybe you only need to be taking backups every 12 or 24 hours. You customize out the scheduling and the policies, and then you're using the backups that are created during through the policy, and test those with that recovery assurance testing to ensure that compliance objectives from an RPO and an RPO standpoint are being met. We spin these up in an isolated sandbox and benchmark the actuals for you. We have proactive ransomware detection to identify anomalies in data sets, and with our purpose-built SaaS-based Office 365 backup solution, that's now integrated with proactive dark web monitoring, so we'll give you hints or alerts to potentially compromised credentials that are already live and available on the dark web. So you can take proactive steps to clean up and secure potential accounts at risk. And the last piece that they called out was performance. And we touched on that a little bit, but we're really aiming to streamline the deployment and the management experience with what we call a purpose-built all-in-one appliance. There's no need to be bringing in additional databases or proxies. You're getting everything that you require out of a consolidated, almost all-in-one hardware unit. We've got a lot of flexibility with regards to recovery as well. So users can opt to recover at a DR site that they and their staff are managing. They can recover into public cloud environments, or take advantage of the Unitrends cloud, where recovery is being handled by our Cloud Cores team as a part of our white glove disaster recovery as a service. And especially in SLED, where we've got certain requirements around long-term retention and data compliance, we've maximized some of those storage efficiencies by leveraging GFS-based retention settings to store key recovery points from certain days, weeks, months, or years without that same storage overhead as you would get accumulating backups in a FIFO method or a first in, first out method. So when it comes to kind of how we can help and some of the problems we're helping our customers solve, we really span the gambit and provide a kind of a continuous layer of protection from your local backup and recovery, offsite recovery options, long-term data recovery, as well as that disaster recovery as a service. Some of the newer callouts are the backup of cloud-native workloads. So if your organization is starting to offset some of their production to AWS or Azure, for example, you could deploy our virtual appliance directly from the AWS or the Azure marketplace, either as a replication target or to back up those cloud native workloads. We touched on earlier, and we'll kind of expand upon this backup service, a SaaS-based service for the Office 365 for G Suite, as well as for Salesforce.com, and ransomware protection and dark web monitoring. One of the interesting studies that I'd come across more recently was some research that was done by Vance and Bourne, and we talked about the benefits of consolidating that vendor deployment. But in essence, they found that when there are too many vendors in the mix, the risk is actually greater, and multiple vendors can lead, in some cases, to more data loss and downtime. When you look at kind of the exponential compounding costs of leveraging multiple vendors, some of that greatest efficiency is when you're in that sweet spot of 1 to 2 vendors, and you don't have too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. And Unitrends, for a lot of our customers, that's been their experience. They've been able to kind of eliminate some of those components that have led to those management headaches. Deployment of our solution starts with a local appliance, and you can choose one of 2 options. You can use our hardware, a purpose-built recovery series. It's a turnkey, no assembly required appliance. You simply rack it, stack it, and give it an IP. If you're looking to leverage existing compute and storage resources, you can deploy our virtual appliance on top of VMware, Hyper-V, Citrix Zen Hypervisor, or Nutanix AHV, as well as we had mentioned, as a native AWS or Azure instance. And from there, you're going to start protecting the assets across your environment. And Unitrends has compatibility for over 250 operating systems, applications, and hypervisors. So whether you're working in an environment that is primarily physical, virtual, or you've got really specific and granular needs for your applications, we've got ways to deploy and protect those assets in order to meet the recovery objectives, whether that be through application level protection, file-based protection, image protection, or those hypervisor snapshots. But as we had mentioned, that local appliance has eliminated some of those management components, in that the compute, the storage, the virtualization layer, the operating system, and the backup software is already pre-tuned and pre-installed, optimized for the storage allocated on the appliance. This also includes things such as your deduplication and compression engines. We leverage global inline data deduplication. It includes your recovery testing engines, as well as all of your reporting. So again, there are no proxies that you need to stand up as the environment starts to grow, no back-end databases that you need to bring to the table to get nice graphical reports. It's all coming self-contained and ready to go out of the appliance itself. For our customer at Lynx, formerly the Florida Transportation Authority, they had some real challenges around their environment because they're aiming to serve customers and maintain low fares. They didn't have a lot of revenue for new IT investments, and they operate a mixed environment of some VMware and some databases that are operating on bare metal, running SQL. And prior to Unitrends, they were rotating LTO tapes off-site, but it was a strategy that didn't give them a lot of confidence. It was slow to recover, kind of a manual, laborious process. And they weren't able to test, so they had no visibility into whether or not they were able to meet the compliance objectives that they had set. When they set out to deploy a new solution, they looked at a number of options and opted to settle on Unitrends. They deployed that purpose-built physical appliance to streamline some of their data center assets. They eliminated the need for that tape library and legacy equipment by opting to archive to disk using our RDXDA media controller, and benefited from some faster recoveries of their virtual environment, and they're able to report regularly on the status of backups and replication. They were so enamored with the Unitrends solution that they actually donated their original unit when they refreshed a couple of years ago to another agency within the municipality, so that they could, quote, have some of the same backup advantages that we had. I think the story here is automation, ease of use, and really simplicity as they're managing their environment with pretty limited resources from both an IT and a budgetary standpoint. We hit on earlier ransomware protection, and I think that it's key. When we looked at reports from Emsisoft, a security provider, there were over 1,100 attacks that were targeted towards healthcare, governmental, and educational entities in the U.S. alone last year, and it's numbers that we expect only to climb. COVID-19 fast became one of the most common topics for phishing in just a few short months, and about 25% of all phishing variants are containing or have within them some more sophisticated or malicious malware or ransomware. We've really taken a three-step approach from a hardened Linux kernel, a mutable backup infrastructure, keeps the backups themselves secure from encryption. And it's not kind of an open Windows-based share or a commonly accessible network share, very difficult to compromise Linux because of the hierarchical permissions model. On the front end, we had mentioned a predictive analytics engine, and this is an element of machine learning that every appliance is equipped with. We're monitoring your production environment and will alert you to anomalous changes. We're looking at things such as rates of change or the entropy or the overall randomness of the data. For example, if we were backing up a database that had about 4% change and looked like regularly structured files, if all of a sudden that change rate balloons to 25, 27%, and that previously structured data is looking unstructured, almost scrambled, it could be indicative of encryption. So it's going to trigger an alert so that you can investigate the source of the anomaly and take the right steps if it is, in fact, a ransomware infection. It's helped a number of our customers catch some of those slower burning infections in the act, if you will. The last piece comes from recovery assurance, knowing that you have previously tested and vetted down to the application level the recovery points that you plan on using. For our customers at Taylor Community Schools, again, kind of the story of the overworked IT staff, 3 IT individuals for over 1,800 faculty, staff, and students. Their environment was fully virtualized on VMware prior to leveraging Unitrends. They, similarly to Lynx, were rotating LTO tapes off-site, but had left Windows in their DR testing and recovery capabilities. They opted as well to deploy one of our physical appliances to streamline that data center footprint and consolidate their protection. A little over 10 terabytes of data that they're now protecting with a 1U appliance. But really key was that when they had a ransomware attack that was spread due to file sharing among folks in their department, they found a clean, tested backup and leveraged Unitrends instant recovery for VMware to remove that threat and recover the server in the wake of that attack. You can read more about their experience on Unitrends.com. Another piece when we talk about eliminating some of the manual tasks that come with the day-to-day management of the system is Unitrends Helix. And the goal here is really to help you solve common backup issues with no effort. Once Helix is installed, it's an entirely SaaS-based autonomous remediation platform. And today we're going to do a few supportive activities to keep your day-to-day operations running smoothly. We'll keep the appliance versions up to date. You do have to opt in. We're not just going to push and update appliances without your knowledge, but you can opt into updates so you've got the latest patch fixes and security patches. We're also going to monitor and remediate those VSS service issues again so that we can take clean, consistent backups rather than coming into a failed backup and warning alerts throughout the UI and your email notifications. You'd come into an email from Helix letting you know that a remediation was taken and that the clean backup was then taken subsequently. So it keeps you up to date on any actions that are performed. And as we continue to build and find the right sweet spot, if you will, for Unitrends Helix, we see this touching virtual environments, being able to automate server recovery upon failure. We're working on a lot. We're really excited about some of the things to come with Helix, so you can certainly keep an eye out for that. The recovery assurance piece is the other piece that we're really automating and benefiting for a lot of our customers. And again, you can see where we've drilled down into the application layer to validate, for example, in this screenshot, the Active Directory domain service, the NTDS database. But you can script custom application behavioral scripts. We've written over 50 canned scripts that you can already leverage. So again, you can simulate kind of the boot order of these machines and testing for dependencies, as well as ensure that particular services are running, database instances are on and responding, queries are producing the expected output, and so on. The reports that you get both from a compliance and a recovery assurance standpoint are easily exportable into PDF or CSV files. So you can put those into the hands of your CIO, compliance officer, and other individuals that would require or benefit from that information. So as we continue our deployment of Unitrends, we've got a lot that we can do around the local environment, but it's critical that we're still getting data off-site. And Unitrends replicates to one of two classifications of targets. The first would be what we call a cold copy target, something that's maybe physically disconnected from the network. It could be disk, tape, another storage device that's located off-site, or is media that's physically being disconnected and locked in a fireproof vault, in a bank, being taken off by Iron Mountain. These cold backups could also be sent to a public cloud bucket such as an AWS S3 or S3IA to take advantage of that cheap and deep storage. The disadvantage to the cold copy is that it's available for recovery once it's imported back to a Unitrends appliance, so a little bit of a longer RTO. To help meet more aggressive RTOs, we have as well replication to what we would call the hot site or another Unitrends appliance. This could be a secondary, physical, or virtual appliance. You can kind of mix and match based on the availability and the hardware available to you at each site. This could also be, again, the Unitrends cloud with that recovery assurance and that disaster recovery as a service, that white glove recovery of instances in the Unitrends cloud. For integration with public clouds, we do have, as we had mentioned, the storage of offsite backup copies. You can deploy our virtual appliance to back up cloud-native instances, such as AMIs. You can also perform disaster recovery, replicate backups, and recover those within Amazon from the local environment. But for other users, they may leverage or opt to leverage Unitrends Cloud. It's a purpose-built cloud service, so we're not going to have that general use public cloud, and it's a little bit more of a streamlined experience and less of a learning curve for organizations that are just getting started or looking to adopt the cloud for the first time. As we mentioned earlier, the Unitrends Cloud is really focused on long-term data retention as well as disaster recovery as a service. Now, one thing to note is that you can recover self-service backup copies from the Unitrends Cloud right from your local UI down to the file level with no ingress or egress fees. So there are no additional charges. We charge based on the storage amount and the retention required. There are no fees for ingress. You can make recoveries as needed directly from the Unitrends UI. Now, while recovery in or from our cloud is entirely self-service, recovery in the Unitrends cloud is what we call white glove. Our cloud team has already onboarded and seeded the environment. We've tested it and report back to you regularly, either on a weekly or a monthly basis, the results of regular ongoing recovery testing. And in the need or in the event of a disaster, we will spin up and host the mission-critical instances or applications on your behalf in the Unitrends cloud, help you reroute your user traffic and direct those to the sites. If you need something like a public-facing IP to host your website or an e-commerce site, that's going going to be available for you. And we are the only vendor in the industry that will guarantee a recovery effort based on a contractually guaranteed RTO SLA. And we offer 3 levels of the service, either a 1-hour, 24-hour, or best effort SLA. For our users at the city of Lynchburg, long-term data retention was a significant issue. They were using another software vendor, but had been a little bit over-licensed, and the renewal was becoming increasingly expensive year over year. So they were looking for similar capabilities, but also to solve challenges around kind of a growing and a sprawling storage environment. As they were vetting other vendors, they settled on Unitrends, taking advantage of existing compute and storage resources that they had by deploying our local appliance and pairing that with a storage bucket in the Unitrends cloud for some of their long-term data retention of their backups. They're able to meet their Freedom of Information Act retention with those cloud-based backup copies. They can recover those at any time in the need of e-discovery or an audit, and they get automated status reporting on the backups, the replication, and their retention status. You can read more about their experience and their journey with Unitrends on unitrends.com. One of the other pieces, and kind of with a couple of minutes left here, I wanted to touch on is the support for a remote workforce and some of the users that are now displaced. We've seen a lot of changes with COVID-19. I know that in Massachusetts, where I'm based, we have some schools that have gone back fully virtual, others that are going back kind of part-time or have students alternating, but we need to support the data that's being created on the edge. And this was a trend that was kind of starting up even before COVID-19. We've got a couple of tools and have taken advantage of some of our technologies to meet this new use case for our users. With our Unitrends Cloud Backup, you have direct-to-cloud backup for Windows-based PCs and even servers directly to the Unitrends Cloud. So you simply deploy a lightweight hardened version of our file agent onto any PC or device you want protected, and that is paired with a secure private instance in the Unitrends Cloud. We put some hardening into this agent to support reliable backup over the WAN. The scheduling is opportunistic and easily set. And our team is managing all of that back-end management, monitoring, and updating of that storage environment. You can really mix and match and use UCB with just about any endpoint management solution, and you can recover to any machine with the UCB agent. So the event of a device being lost or damaged, you can recover the contents of that device and its backups to another device. Just install that agent first. The other piece is protecting SaaS data, and I think that it's pretty common, and a lot of vendors are talking about how in the clouds you have a shared model of responsibility. And while your internal IT department may not own the application, the software, the storage elements, the user, the administration of the application and the data is still the responsibility of the subscriber to the service. So in order to help guard against internal and external threats, accidental deletions, and more, we have Spanning. It's a cloud-to-cloud backup service for your Office 365, G Suite, and Salesforce. Similarly to the Unitrends Cloud, the Spanning team is performing all of the monitoring and management of the cloud environment. It is a secure and SSA 18 certified cloud-based storage environment, and it's licensed really easily, kind of designed to have the same look and feel as your O365 account and licensed the same way. You get unlimited retention, unlimited storage for a per user per month subscription. And the only other thing I wanted to note is it's a little bit more secure than some of the other users that are going in and creating service accounts or guest accounts. We're accessing through application level authorization through OAuth 2.0. So we're not storing any credentials or creating an additional account that could ultimately be a backdoor for malicious users. The cool thing about our Office 365 and kind of the bigger picture that we are building and working towards here at Kaseya, who is Unitrends' parent company, is some of the integrations on the back end that we have among some of the other business units and solutions. And this is one of the really cool ones. One of the ones that's got us really excited is the integration between our Spanning backup and our integrated dark web monitoring. We are monitoring thousands of botnets, chat rooms, dark web bulletin boards, private networks, and more for credentials that may have been leaked in a data breach or otherwise compromised. And it's going to trigger an alert for your administrators when we sense or find leaked credentials on any of your domains. that are available on the dark web. In this example and in this screenshot, you can see that we've identified where we've got a password hit and where we've located that data, so that you can begin that conversation with your employees, talking about the right practices as far as clicking and accessing links, as well as good password hygiene and health. It's purpose-built for O365. There's no active integrations that are required. Really fast and easy to get stood up and to start using. We have talked a lot about a lot of different tools, and I would recommend anyone visit unitrends.com to get started. We've got some really aggressive pricing and promotions to help folks get their hands on the technology that they need today, even with some of the uncertainty that's gone around with COVID-19. But we also have a number of different tools, free trials and software editions, evaluations that are available. So if you'd like to try any of the tools and the solutions that we have talked about here today, feel free to visit us at unitrends.com, and we would be happy to assist, answer any questions that you might have, and let you give a test run of any of the solutions and the tools that we have to offer. At this point here, I will turn it back over for any Q&A and answer anything that's come in. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, great presentation, Adam. As always, great to have you on. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do that, I've just brought up this poll that says, what additional information would you like out there in the audience from Adam at Unitrends and Unitrends as a company? So we'll just leave that up there while we do some Q&A. Adam, are you ready?
I am ready to go, David. Fire away.
All right. So let's see. First question, John's got some questions here about Helix. Does Helix support specific versions of Windows Server, or how does that work with Helix?
So for Helix, you're typically going to install Helix on any assets that you are protecting where you've got the Unitrends agent installed as well, performing backups. So this could be within a virtual machine that's running Windows as the guest OS, physical Windows servers. Today, in our early stages, we support Windows Server versions 2012 and up, both 32 and 64-bit, as well as on the desktop or the PC side, Windows 8 and up, 32 and 64-bit. But as we continue to kind of build out new use cases and script additional healing and remediation procedures, that could be something that's supported down the road. I think that John even makes a great point that some of those older or aging systems are ones that may require that remediation to be taking place. So it certainly is something to keep an eye out for, though today we cannot support Windows 2003 with the Helix agent.
Got it. Okay. And then next question, you mentioned AWS. Does Unitrends integrate with any other cloud storage vendors?
We do. So certainly for that cold storage or that long-term retention, users can pair that with an AWS S3 or S3 IA bucket. But for that cold copy backup, we can also integrate with Google Cloud Storage, both standard and nearline clouds, as well as Rackspace. The only one where we're a little bit limited in terms of the quote-unquote archive or that cheap and deep storage would be something like Azure. But you could deploy a UB and perform DR into Azure. We just don't have that integration with the cheap and deep, kind of that colder storage.
Got it. Okay. And then a question about deduplication. How does that work with Unitrends?
So with Unitrends, we introduced in one of our older releases, accelerated adaptive deduplication. So our goal here is to optimize the retention on the appliance. So we're actually synthesizing and removing duplicate data before it's ever stored or written to the backup appliance. And you've even got some reduction in the amount of the landing zone space that is required. The goal here is to decrease the required storage footprint and as well as increase the on-appliance retention. So for something like a file level backup, the dedupe is running and removing duplicate data as the backups are run. So again, reducing the amount of data that's written to the appliance. For something like a VMware or a snapshot, we're removing duplicate blocks client side before data is even sent over the network to the backup appliance. So you've got less data that's going to be transmitted to the unit to really help consolidate some of the storage requirement and optimize that on-appliance retention.
Very nice. And then what about spanning. What are the requirements in terms of storage for Office 365 backup with spanning?
The beauty of spanning, David, is that all of the storage is provided by their service. So spanning is actually a SaaS-based platform itself. It's a cloud-to-cloud backup service, and the spanning tenant is within AWS, but it doesn't require any local hardware to manage. You don't need an AWS account. The back-end tenant for spanning is all monitored and maintained by their staff. It is an SSA 18 certified tenant, but you get unlimited retention and unlimited storage while you are subscribed to the service. No management locally of any storage.
Very nice. I like that. It looks like we're running out of time here in our session. Last question I wanted to ask is, how do you get started with the Unitrends disaster recovery as a service?
So I think that the best place is to visit unitrends.com and get in touch with us. Our team, if you think that the DRAS piece is kind of the right start or might be the right service for your organization, I'd recommend getting in touch with one of our experts. And really, I think that our goal is we want to take time to really map through and understand the recovery needs and the objectives that each organization is trying to hit. Every environment is unique, and we can design our deployments, whether it's the host-level snapshots, the image-based, to accommodate DRAS or other modes of recovery to ensure that we're being able to meet both the RPOs and the RTOs that you have individually or uniquely as a part of your business continuity plan. So that DRAS conversation and the onboarding, our team certainly helps and facilitates that transition in that process, but I think that it's part of a larger conversation about the overall kind of business continuity strategy for your organization and where that DRAS is a fit. We'd be happy to kind of explore that option and help folks kind of get started with seeding the data and mapping through what that would look like. Excellent.
All right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have, but it's been really great having you on again, Adam. Thank you so much.
David, it's always a pleasure, and thanks everyone that came out today. Enjoy the rest of the EcoCast event. Thanks again.
For more information on Unitrends, check out the handout that's available there in your audience console. You can actually also visit, as Adam said, the unitrends.com website and try out the Unitrends solution for yourself. And now it's time for our next prize drawing. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Jessica Morgan from Maryland. Congratulations, Jessica Morgan from Maryland. Still one more gift card to give out, so make sure you stay tuned. And with that, I'm excited to introduce Justin from Mimecast. Justin's a sales engineer there at Mimecast. Great to have you on, Justin. Are you with us?
I am with you. Thank you.
Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Thank you. So really quick, I am a solutions architect, a sales engineer with Mimecast. And what I'm here to talk about today is going to be, with all the changes that have occurred over the past 9 months, where should we be focusing our efforts to stay ahead in this ever-changing threat landscape? I like to start the story 9 months ago, give you a sense of the world then. What might feel like decades and a world ago really hasn't been all that long. And the conversations that we have been having these past 6 months specifically have been drastically changed from what we traditionally have talked about. Now, as security engineers and as security professionals, these are pretty much a good, quick, high-level overview of what really we're concerned about. This is our day job. We understand that cybersecurity risks, most often between 90 and 95%, depending on your country, you leverage email in some manner or another. And when, not if, those attacks happen and are successful, how long might it take me to understand that this is a breach that has occurred? And then finally, the costs. What happens once that goes public? The financial costs to the institution, the reputation costs to our brand and to our name, and then even personal. If you understood that someone who just suffered a major exploit, a major attack, a major hack, has security professionals now looking for jobs elsewhere, that kind of thing can follow you as a security professional as you progress through your career. So when I have conversations with schools and with the municipalities, aside from that primary goal, that securing the network, the other initiatives that we see can be broken up into 3 major pillars. First, we understand that defense in layers is really the best thing we can do. The more engines, the more layers we apply to that security stack, the better off we're going to be. And perhaps one of those layers we apply is actually investing in the end users themselves. If we invest and educate them, turn the human firewall into a security asset rather than being just simply a kind of status quo, that can help us become more resilient. And then the last column, the last pillar, is going to be moving to cloud, whether it's on-prem legacy server closet hardware that you are antiquated, running old systems or old hardware, Office 365, old Exchange servers. There's a giant move to cloud-based services, and these are the things that concerned us. And up until March, this is the things we talked about. Then the world changes. That's when on March 11th, the pandemic is officially declared, and services like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, those become household names in a matter of just days. The budgets and the staffing now in your organization are being affected across the board. Did you have to furlough individuals on your security team? Did you have to furlough maybe an entire subset of your organization? The budget's also being affected because of the giant downturn in economic activity. And then lastly, other things we have to consider is the politics of the situation. How do local municipalities navigate that knife's edge between mitigating damage to the local economy and local businesses, as well as ensuring the safety of the people that live in those environments, that live in those economies? So, security professionals were now laden with three more pillars, three more things to take into consideration. We need to figure out and focus how to enable remote workforce or remote learners. How can you use your security infrastructure to secure people from a home office? They may not even be using hardware that you've approved. They might be using a home laptop, a home desktop. Normalizing that reality, getting them to understand VPN logins, at least get you sat behind a firewall. Ensure that email continuity if you're running an on-prem exchange. Then finally, on top of that, the threats themselves we have been facing have increased. Now, Mimecast has published a quick report that is called The First 100 Days of COVID. And in it, it outlines just some of the trends we had seen within those first few months. For example, impersonations, URLs, malware, all of those, we saw a significant uptick in those vectors of exploit and attacks across the entire globe. And the reason for that is, it's unfortunate to say, but a tragedy never goes unexploited. Whether it's Brexit, Notre Dame burning down, Hong Kong protests, Amazon, Australian wildfires, each one of those situations were exploitable in their own unique way. However, a global pandemic is a rare phenomenon. That combination of tragedy and fear, uncertainty, turn this into the perfect storm of attackers. And the maliciousness we saw doesn't just end in email-based threats. Between March and the end of April, we also noticed that there were 86,000 malicious domains related to COVID that were spun up in that time. They were either deemed being risky or being outright malicious. So with these limited resources, you're now focusing on a wider footprint with people working from home, using remote software, remote logins, as well as dealing with a sudden influx, a high tide of attacks coming inbound. And we have to get it right 100% of the time. If your organization is suffering 20 million attacks in a day, while the universities like Penn State might call that a Tuesday, smaller, more local infrastructure can get overwhelmed beyond even the standard email attacks with the standard malicious domains being spun up. Even an increase in minor domain denial of service attacks we saw an uptick in. So, securing your institution, we know, is not easy. First, you're running a lean IT team, whether that is because of a furlough, you had to lay off, or just simply furlough those individuals, whether or not it was simply you just couldn't fill that head count, that seat count, because it's not a secret that there's a skills shortage in cybersecurity, right from help desk all the way up to CISO, everything in between. There just simply aren't enough of us at this point. The infrastructure you're hosted on, part of the reason we're seeing a lot of industries, a lot of schools, a lot of municipalities updating to cloud-based models is because they're running old systems, outdated, end-of-lifed, all of which have some sort of exploit that's probably been detected since the thing stopped being updated, stopped being patched. And then finally, your faculty and your staff. The end user that doesn't care about security is your weakest link. The end user that doesn't pay attention, maybe they know what to look for, but they don't care, is also your weakest link. So, with all of this doom and gloom, there is a recommendation that we have for you. And I'm going to start with understand that the fundamentals of the attacks really haven't changed. Sure, the dressing has, the frosting on that cake has, but more often than not, the attacks are going to leverage email. More often than not, they're going to be specifically targeting individuals, not an entire mass of people, not entire industries or departments, individuals. Keep in mind that out-of-date software is only going to get more and more vulnerable as time goes on. And once those email attacks are successful, most of them will then utilize the web in some way, command and control, exfiltration of data, and so on and so forth. So then, where I recommend that you start is with the end user. It's no secret that training today just simply isn't glorious. It isn't fun. It isn't very entertaining. It's kind of a click and drill mentality where I know I have to suffer through this to just simply continue about my day. 64% being unenthusiastic, and with 97% of us being unable to spot that sophisticated, carefully crafted fish, this is probably the place where it's the easiest lift to get started to improve that resiliency across your space, across your infrastructure. If perchance you know your end users just aren't taking to training, they're just simply, it's not sinking in, they're still a little click happy, they see something blue and underlined, they're going to click on it. What if you can get them to laugh, get them a little more emotionally engaged rather than that sort of mundaneness of drilling at them all the different protocols that they need to be aware of? No. Get them to giggle. Get them to laugh. Get that emotional credence, that emotional touch point to educate from there and teach someone that security isn't just a professional problem. It's not just IT's problem. It's a professional problem, yet it's also a personal problem. After awareness training, I think it might be time that you start reevaluating the security infrastructure itself, starting with email. The gateway you may have had for maybe only a few months, maybe for years and years, I would recommend set aside an hour of your week. Once a week, vet out and talk to another supplier, another vendor. See what other changes have happened in this space since you last looked around, you last shopped around, and get an idea of what's different now. What can a solution do for you to help mitigate and help save end users and your admins who are already stressed enough as it is, that time and effort so that they maybe don't have to wear so many hats. If you can cut down on those 20 million attacks coming inbound to even 1%, that still can be really onerous, really overwhelming for a limited team. Hone it down, then move on to things internal to your organization. Now that you have your defense in layers at the gateway, at the web portals, why not have a response also in depth, also in layers? You see a bad email coming inbound, you block it outright. Sure, great. That's a police solution working. But what when it doesn't? What if something does come in? Can the solution now help the other moving parts of your security infrastructure remediate that threat? Can your email gateway pull bad emails out of your inboxes? Can that Sophos Unitrends, Fortinet, those local antivirus systems, get that feed from the security email, the web email, gateway, and remediate threats that might be on local machines? Can that be fed to your firewall through some way, through some sort of connection, whether it be API or direct? Helping prevent the end user itself, teaching them that they can have a hand in securing your infrastructure does go a long way, but stopping that lateral spread inside the organization from the inside through all the different infrastructure parts you have can go a long way. But I don't want you to forget what exists outside your perimeter, out beyond your borders. If I decide to attack an organization directly, maybe I don't even have to use your infrastructure, use your users. I can attack your clients. And with a simple lookalike domain, how many of those clients, of those constituents, might fall for something that just simply looks enough like your branding, looks enough like your domain? Getting the ecosystem at all of these stops, at all of these zones, to talk with each other, share those those IOCs across the entire space, helps you build a more resilient, a more responsive security infrastructure. My last point, the last thing I'd like to suggest, more of like a future consideration, is going to be DMARC. If we were having this conversation 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, that figure on the bottom would have said between 5 and 6%. DMARC is coming. It is being adopted globally. And as more government institutions, government departments, local municipalities, financial and healthcare institutions are mandating DNS authentication, DMARC is something we all need to be aware of being maybe the next step in what we're considering journeying through to finally reach that full-blown reject policy. So in summary, I would like to remind you that the easiest thing, maybe not the most straightforward, but the easiest place to start would probably be educate the end user. Consider if the security infrastructure, the secure email gateway, so to speak, is it able to communicate, to cooperate, and share intel through all of your disparate security systems, security services? Or does the gateway mandate you talk to specific companies? Does it allow you with an open API infrastructure to create your own connections, can create your own sharing of intel? Or do you have to use something that's pre-canned? Then, lastly, DMARC is something I think that is becoming more and more important. I think it's something we should all be paying attention to and something we should all be moving our organizations to eventually adopting. Thank you.
Great presentation, Justin. Really cool, really insightful stuff there. Thank you so much. We do have some questions for you, and while we do that, I'm just going to bring up this poll for everyone out there in the audience that says, what additional information would you like about Mimecast? And we'll leave that up there while we take some questions. So if you have a question right now about the Mimecast solution or about Justin's presentation, now is the time to get it in. First question I see I wanted to ask you, Justin, is how are you advising your clients to build cyber resilience into their systems in light of what you've learned throughout the pandemic?
To boil it down to a single sentence, I'd say don't lose sight of the goal. While COVID has been going on, IT teams are being stressed even more than they have traditionally been. Like we talked about, with a greater footprint and even less resources to work that footprint, it's easier to get caught up in the now and the immediates and the nows that we need, but losing sight of the eventual place we'd like to land, like a fully integrated security, infrastructure, all of our moving pieces sharing intel across the entire platform, automating that response in depth, I think, is probably what I would first recommend.
Okay, solid advice. And there's a question from John here. He's asking, just to confirm, you have seen an uptick in activity from bad actors trying to disrupt systems?
Absolutely. One thing that we often see, the impersonations, the email-borne threats, that's kind of a given. We expected that. What we also notice, though, is that a denial of service attack can sometimes be launched simply just to mask some sort of exfiltration of data. If I can flood your logs on your firewall with all these nonsense connections that you have to reject, do you see that one connection that's now streaming out terabytes of information? So yes, absolutely, we've seen that.
Got it. And then what can you tell us about the Mimecast security awareness educational system? How do users get added to that? Is there, I mean, if you have hundreds or thousands of users, how do they get into this system?
So the system's delivered to them just in a simple email. They just click a link. They would be brought to a quick video that, and the way we approach awareness training is we know that your time is important. Your time is really yours. And all we really ask is just simply 5 minutes of your user time a month. That seems to be a pretty good sweet spot for the stickiness of the lessons and not being too invasive to really kind of put a bummer on the idea of training. To access it, it's a simple link. It's integrated right from Active Directory. So if your end users are in Active Directory, they'll be added to the platform.
Very nice. Yeah, that sounds super easy. And just five minutes a month. So as an administrator of this security awareness solution, what sort of metrics would I look at to determine, if it's making a difference?
Oh boy. That would be, to be honest, I think that's a conversation all until itself. It depends what kind of security professional you are. If you're looking to see what kind of DNS traffic is spawned from email, then it's going to be URL centric. What are we blocking specifically on bad URLs before your end users can even click on it? If yours is more help desk oriented, maybe your concern is more just local antivirus and blocking bad attachments. It really depends, I think, on your role. But I think a great place to start is if the platform could share intel, and if that intel is coming from many different sources, like what happens when you get a prognosis from a doctor, the smart thing to do is go get a second opinion. You don't take that one doctor's opinion, because they can get things wrong. Just like any other solution out there, I would recommend listening to a company that has those solutions built in, and even let you choose which other solutions, those other second opinions, you want to pull from.
Very insightful. I like that. Good approach. All right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have in our Q&A session, but it's been really great having you on. Thank you so much, Justin.
Likewise. Thank you.
And thank you to Mimecast for supporting today's event. Make sure that you check out the handout that's available for download there in your audience console. It's an industry brief for public sector, state, and local government institutions, and it talks about the Mimecast solution that Justin just presented in his session there. So make sure you check that out. Also visit mimecast.com and sign up for a free trial. And now I'm excited to introduce the final presenter on today's Modernizing and Securing State, Local Government, and Educational Institution EcoCast event. That is Mr. Mike Preston, Technical Marketing Engineer at Rubrik. Mike, always great to have you on. Take it away.
Everyone, and thanks so much for joining the webcast this afternoon or morning or whatever it is wherever you are. Today, I want to give you all a brief introduction into Rubrik, and more specifically, what Rubrik can do besides data protection. Now, I know there's a lot of state, local, and education organizations attending today, and we actually have a lot of customers that fit into that category. And a lot of it has to do with what we can do beyond simply just protecting data. Now, before I get into that, let me first introduce myself. I'm Mike Preston, and you can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet at MW Preston. So if you have a question and we don't get to it today, or if something comes up at a later time, please don't hesitate to reach out. I've been here at Rubrik for a little over a couple of years, working as a developer advocate. But I think for today's audience, perhaps talking a little bit about where I came from before joining Rubrik is a more interesting scenario. So prior to Rubrik, I spent nearly 20 years working within the educational system here in Canada. So I know firsthand the struggles and challenges that state, local, and educational institutions face. For me, it was always budget. Not so much the lack thereof, even though that's become a concern, but really the unpredictability of it. Being on a yearly budget and having the unknown as to what might come down the pike 2 or 3 or 5 years out really creates some challenges as it pertains to infrastructure and software renewal. Now, certainly the introduction of SaaS helped us out a lot. Being able to adopt products like Office 365 really helped. It has eliminated that 5-year cycle of upgrading on-prem Exchange and trying to guesstimate the amount of dollars that's going to cost. But the fact of the matter was, and it really still is, while I was in the educational space, we were constantly battling against the unknown. Not knowing budgets, not knowing the exact way that the technology industry would turn, these things all made it difficult when we were procuring new software. Which is why during that procurement phase, we were always looking at software that can provide a little bit of extra value. Not only value in what it was designed to do, but value in vision, value in innovation. We basically needed to do more with less, and we had to rely on our partners and software vendors to deliver on that for us. And that's really what I want to speak about today. So first, I'll quickly go over the Rubrik vision, who we are, what we do, how we do it. Then I'll move into a topic beyond just basic backup and recovery. Rubrik provides much more than just data protection, and I'll explain exactly how we do that. Then of course we'll move into a demo because honestly, seeing is believing, right? From there, we'll wrap up and I'll get to any questions that were asked. Now, we've only got about 20 minutes here, so let's dive in. So first up, when we say the Rubrik platform is cloud data management, what do we really mean by that? Well, the easiest way to explain that is to break it down piece by piece like in this diagram. At the core, we have modernization and automation, and there are really 5 main components that drive that. First, we have app awareness. This is the idea that we don't only back up your data, but we process the metadata as well. We understand the where, the when, and the how of the files that we back up. And this becomes super relevant as we develop new and exciting applications to get more from your data. We were also built with cloud in mind, meaning our platform not only gives us visibility into the on-premises workloads like VMware or Hyper-V, but we also can protect customers as they move into the cloud with cloud-native protection of Azure and AWS, or even protection of SaaS applications like Microsoft 365. This all leads us to the idea of unified management. We provide one single console where you can manage all of your data, no matter where it currently resides. Immutability is another core piece of our platform, and we'll talk a bit more about that in some upcoming slides. And finally, we design our products with an API-first approach. Everything that you do within our user interface can also be accomplished by calling an underlying API, an API that is very well documented and super easy to use. This allows for easy integration into any existing automation workflows you may have in place. And more relevant for today's topic is the top layer of applications. First, we have our backup modernization. With near zero RTOs when it comes to recovery, we're able to utilize our backup data for more than just simple restoration. And furthermore, since we're constantly collecting metadata around your data, we've launched applications around data governance and cyber resilience. Again, we'll go into these details in a couple of slides. So we have this platform we've built, and sitting at the heart of it is our SLA policy engine. Now, an SLA domain simply defines your data protection strategy, and it's applied to your workloads, and you're off to the races. No configuring and setting up jobs, no deploying proxies, just define some very simple information such as your RPO, how often do you want to back up, and your retention, how long would you like to keep those backups around. This is all inputted into one simple window as shown, and then we can apply that back to nearly any type of workload. The workloads will then automatically adhere to the constructs that we defined. Think about Azure VMs or Office 365, VMware, SQL, physical Windows and Linux, and much, much more. All of these governed by a simple SLA domain. There's no scheduling of jobs, no chaining of jobs. Simply define how you want your workloads protected, assign workloads to that SLA domain, and let Rubrik handle everything else. So now that we've got a bit of an understanding of how Rubrik works, let's try and imagine a world beyond just restoring data. Imagine that, a backup company brushing off the fact that they can restore data. But the fact of the matter is, Rubrik is much, much more than just a backup company, and I'll tell you why. First, we provide you with a means to use that backup data for much, much more than just recovery. Sure, our customers are able to recover very, very fast using a feature that we call Live Mount, essentially as fast as it takes for their virtual machine to boot up its OS. However, we've also seen our customers leveraging this technology for much, much more. Being able to quickly spin up clones of your infrastructure provides many benefits, including those of test dev, reporting purposes, auditing. The list is really endless. And then there's the fact that we're immutable. The sheer fact that once data is written to Rubrik, it cannot be modified allows us to ensure data consistency within our backups. And this consistency is really what powers Radar, our ransomware detection and remediation application, as well as SOAR, our data governance application. So let's dive into these 4 value adds a little more. First up, I mentioned Live Mount, our ability to spin up clones in a near instant fashion. Well, the way this works is that the Rubrik software actually becomes a data store within your vSphere environment, or in the event of utilizing it for SQL, an SMB mount. From there, we're able to expose the backups into vCenter as a virtual machine, and they can be instantly powered on to any point in time. Certainly, the majority of our customers utilize this for things like test and dev, being able to provision clones to certain point in times to their developers for different business purposes. But we also see this being used for things like application and upgrade testing. Why not test the upgrade or patch on a clone of the production VM to see if there will be any impact to it? Or pen testing, or even for running, very long performance-hungry queries or reports from database services. The use cases here are really endless and stretch far beyond backup and recovery. Now, secondly, I mentioned immutability. Now let me illustrate why this is important for your backups to be immutable. Quite often, your backups are your last line of defense, the last means for getting your business back up and running. Now, in the event that ransomware hits or there's some sort of malicious attack, be it internal or external, if your backups aren't immutable, they can also be destroyed or encrypted or deleted or infected right along with the rest of your production data, making them pretty much useless as a last line of defense. Now with Rubrik, we have immutability built into our custom file system. So in the event that your production environment is attacked, it cannot spread into your backups, meaning we're always going to be here to save the day. Your data is going to be consistent to the exact point in time that you took that backup. Now, immutability really leads me into our next value add that goes far beyond just simple backup, and that's ransomware detection. Since we have collected all of that metadata around your data, and since our backups are immutable, we have the ability to compare different backups and determine if there are any anomalies. Now, this all takes place through a product called Polaris Radar, and it works like so. First, we have a number of machine learning algorithms that run, comparing and churning your data in order to determine if any anomalies exist between different point-in-time snapshots of your data. From there, if anomalies are detected, we're able to quickly and easily present you back with a report, showing essentially what we like to call your blast radius. We can show you exactly what files, folders, and servers were affected by these anomalies. And finally, since we have the immutable backups, we can offer you a one-click restore in order to instantly recover to the most recent point-in-time snapshot before the attack took place. Now, some of you may have heard recently about a ransomware attack on the city of Durham. Well, thankfully they were a Rubrik customer, and this quote here comes directly from the mayor, who who stated publicly the confidence they had when it came to restoring their crucial pieces of their infrastructure. Thankful that their backups were immutable and that they cannot and weren't consumed by ransomware. So are you starting to see how we're more than just backup now? No? Well, let's talk about our latest application then that's been developed on top of our platform. And this one deals with data governance. We call this one Polaris SONAR. And SONAR is able to scan your backup data and ensure that it's compliant with any regulations that you might have. Think PCI, GDPR, or HIPAA, or even any custom regulations you may have. It works by taking some predefined templates or custom templates that you've configured and scanning a set of desired resources or backups. SONAR looks for any sensitive information that may be present within the backup, and if it finds any, it's flagged, and then it gets properly reported on and alerts are generated. This allows you to quickly identify sensitive data on locations where maybe it shouldn't be, reducing your overall exposure, all the while having a very minimal to zero impact on your production environment. So we have immutability, live mounts for test dev, ransomware detection and remediation, and data governance. This all coming from Rubrik. I think this really helps define the whole more with less construct. So slides are great and all, but honestly, seeing is believing. So let's jump into the lab and I'm going to show you how all of this stuff works. All right, so here we are within our Rubrik Polaris SaaS instance, and we're sitting on the dashboard screen, which gives us a quick high-level overview of our environment. We can see things like our critical events, backup events, number of events revolving around archiving and replication, and we can also see that Radar, our ransomware product, has indeed found one anomaly. Now before we jump into Radar, let's walk through that process we spoke of live mounting a virtual machine so we can utilize a point-in-time copy for some use case that we may have. So if we head to clusters, we can see all of the different Rubrik instances that we have connected to our Polaris. And in this case, we have 3. Now, if we drill into one here and grab more information, we can see similar type information as we did on the dashboard, just on a cluster level. If we wanted to, we can visit this cluster directly from Polaris, which will take us to the main Rubrik CDM software running at that location. Here we can head down to virtual machines, find the VM that we're looking to live mount. In this case, I'll use my Windows VM, and we then get a calendar view of all of the backups that we have. We can drill into a certain day, select a certain snapshot, and here we have all of our recovery options. So we can do things like recover files, instantly recover the entire VM, or even certain VMDKs or disks within that VM. We also have other retention type settings like placing certain backups on legal hold to ensure that it doesn't get expired out and deleted. Now we could live mount the VM from here, however we do have the option to do this directly from Polaris as well, so let's head back into Polaris and do it from there. So within Polaris, let's now head to inventory. This is going to show us everything that we are protecting with this Polaris instance. You can see we have Office 365 protection, cloud native protection for the big 3 cloud players, and of course vSphere. Let's dive into vSphere. All right, so let me first filter my list of VMs displayed to those being protected by our Cluster B Rubrik instance. And then I'll use the search functionality to quickly locate my Windows VM. As you can see, that same calendar type view is shown, as well as a bit of information displayed about this VM. I'll go ahead and find the backup that I'd like to live mount and click Recovery Options. So similar type options are displayed here as to what we saw in the on-premises deployment of Rubrik. The ability to recover files, mount certain virtual disks, and things like that. Today though, we're looking to quickly create a point-in-time copy of this entire VM. Let's say our application owner wants to run some patch testing on it. So we'll select Live Mount, then we'll simply instruct Rubrik as to which ESXi host to mount this on. I'll select one here from the list shown. We also have a few other options here. We can see things like whether or not we want to recover the tags on that VM, or whether or not we want it powered on or powered off, as well as some network connectivity information. I'll leave all this at default and simply click Finish. So our mount process now has kicked off and things happen pretty quick here, so I'll try and show you before it's done. Remember, there's no data that needs to cross the wire. This VM is simply going to be registered into our vCenter with Rubrik acting as the data store. So to see the status, we can head to Events, and then we can expand the event to get a little more information. So this live mount has already actually set the VM to be powered on, so let's head into vCenter and have a look. So I'll find the live mount on my VM, and as we can see, it's already sitting at the login screen and booted up. So like I said, we can recover VMs, spin up point-in-time copies for developers or whatnot in pretty much as fast as that VM's OS can boot. So this VM is actually already ready for us to hand off to our application owner to do whatever it is they need to do. When they're done, we simply head back into Polaris, select the live mount section, and we can simply unmount this VM. The VM will then be powered off, the data stores will all be cleaned up, and it'll be like it never even happened. So as you can imagine, there are some pretty nifty use cases you can utilize live mount for. And all of this is also available through REST API calls. So if you wanted to implement some sort of self-service so your end users could spin up these point-in-time copies by themselves, it's pretty much a cinch. Okay, so we've demoed live mount. Let's move on to radar and immutability. Remember that radar anomaly that we saw on the dashboard earlier? Let's go investigate that. So we'll drill into it by simply clicking on it, and we can see that our vSphere VM named Demo Radar, how convenient's that, it has a number of files with anomalies. Now if we click on it here, it gives us a bit more information. We can see how many files were deleted and modified and created, and how many of those actions that our radar machine learning algorithm has flagged as suspicious activity. Now, to get even further into the rabbit hole here, we can simply click Investigate Snapshot. This will show us a nice folder hierarchy of all the files and folders within the backup, and we can browse through these if we like, looking at the folders and files that have been affected. We can even filter out if we just want to see files that have been added, or maybe files which have been modified or deleted. I'm going to head back here to the file shares directory, as it looks like the majority of that folder has been infected with something. I'll go ahead and select the complete folder and click Next. Now we get some recovery options. First, we can simply download a known good copy of these files from the backup if we just wanted to pull them down locally to our machine and take some sort of action on them. Or we could also select to overwrite the files, meaning we'll put that known good copy of the files right back into its original location. That said, maybe we want to run some more triage or root cause analysis on the files that are infected. We can also recover these to a different folder on the same machine that they came from. That way we can still grant access to them while being able to run some more triage on the original copies. No matter what though, the known good copies within the rubric backups will remain immutable. And this is the key as to how we can offer radar and ransomware remediation. Remember, you still need to do everything that you can to prevent ransomware. Radar is not going to stop it from striking. However, we can act as that last line of defense and drastically speed up your response and recovery time in the event that it does hit. So that's radar in a nutshell. Let's go and take a look at its data governance cousin, SOAR. I'll head into the card view in the top right here and select SOAR from the list. So first we land on this dashboard, which basically summarizes all of the events and sensitive data hits that SOAR has detected. Now, in order to set up what we call policies, the process in which we detect the sensitive data will head to management. Essentially, the way SOAR works is we have analyzers. Analyzers look for specific pieces of data within your files. Think credit card numbers or employee IDs. These analyzers are then assigned to a policy. A policy dictates what analyzers get ran on what pieces of our infrastructure. So think, look for credit card numbers on this NAS share. Look for passport numbers on these VMs, stuff like that. And we have a number of built-in analyzers which adhere to different compliance configurations. We can filter on things like PCI or PII. Now, even though there are a number of different built-in analyzers, you do have the ability to make your own as well. Let's say we wanted to create an analyzer to look for OENs. These are basically 9-digit confidential numbers that are assigned to students within Ontario. And here you can see we can define this pattern using regex or a dictionary definition. I'm going to go ahead and use regex. So we'll give it a name, enter in our associated regex string here. So this regex is specifying that it must find a 9-digit number, no letters, no more or less than 9. With our analyzer created, we now need to generate a policy in order to run this analyzer on our infrastructure. We'll head back to policies and select configure policies. I'll state that I want to create a new policy and then go ahead and find my newly created Ontario OENs analyzer. We'll give that policy a name, save it, we'll select it again from the list here, and then go to assign it to various objects. So we can run SOAR currently on vSphere VMs, NAS shares, and physical Windows and Linux servers. I'll find my Windows server here and select that. So with the policy all set up, we can see it's currently started its analyzing process. Now this will run on a schedule, basically looking at every backup that we take of my Windows VM. If we simply wanted to run this on demand on different VMs or NAS shares, we could do so by heading into the on demand section. Here we can select what policy we want to run, let's say HIPAA in this case, and then select what inventory object we want to run that against. Maybe I want to scan this NAS share here to ensure I'm compliant. We then get a brief summary and we can kick off an on-demand analysis of that NAS share. So that's how it all gets set up. So let's take a look at what happens when we actually get some hits on some sensitive data. I'll head back to the dashboard and we can see this demo SOAR VM is our top object for hits. I'll go ahead and drill in here. This brings us to a dashboard for sensitive data that it found on that specific VM. Now by default, we're looking at the latest snapshot, but if we wanted to, we can move back in time by selecting different dates and backup times from the drop down in the top right here. Now as you get to your desired point in time, you can simply browse through the backup in a folder level hierarchy, or to just get a list of the files containing sensitive data, you can go ahead and click Files with Hits. This will show you hits on all the analyzers and policies that ran on this VM. Now we can filter again by specific policies if we want to. Now when you find the file that contains hits, selecting it will give us a bit more information about it. Things like the number and types of hits that it found and whatnot. If you want to go even further, clicking the preview button will bring us to the local brick where that backup exists and show us an overview of the exact information within the file surrounding the different hits that contain the sensitive data. We can see here a number of credit card numbers. Now these are fake, by the way, don't try and use them. Now the thing here is though, SOAR quickly allows us to pinpoint sensitive data without having any impact to our production environment. You combine this with live mount and radar and sonar, these are pretty big value adds of the Rubrik platform. Well, let's head back to the slides now and wrap up. All right, so hopefully you can now begin to see the benefits and power of the Rubrik platform. We took a look at sonar and radar as well as live mount. Now, if you want to learn more, we have a few resources listed here, but please, if you have any questions or concerns or would like to go deeper beyond the 20 minutes that we have today in any of these topics, do reach out. My email is mike.preston@rubrik.com. And with that, let's get the Q&A started.
All right, great presentation, Mike. I love the live demo. I learned, I think, more about Rubrik just in that 20 minutes than I have to date. So cool stuff. Thank you so much for doing that. Are you ready for some Q&A?
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, well, I've just brought up a poll question for everyone out there in the audience. I want to call your attention to the poll. You can specify what additional information you'd like about the Rubrik solution. Mike, the first question I see here in the queue that I wanted to ask you is simply about Polaris and Rubrik. Kind of, how do these fit together? Are these two different products, or do they integrate? Are they sold as a single product? How does that work?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So the best way I say to kind of look at it is think of Polaris as a platform. So almost think of Polaris as like your iPhone, and then the backup modernization or the backup product is like an app that runs off of that. So Polaris is our SaaS offering. So that's going to be your main point of entry. And then our data protection software is a service that Polaris offers. So we also offer the ransomware service Radar and the data governance service Sonar as well. And that backup piece covers off things like native Azure protection, native AWS protection. And then for the on-premises applications, things like vSphere, Hyper-V, Nutanix, they all require the Rubrik CDM software. So that lives inside your data center. So that's either via like an appliance that we ship or installed on third-party hardware or a virtual edge cluster that basically runs on top of VMware. That's how that's delivered. So you don't necessarily need Polaris to monitor and manage your on-prem deployments. You can just use the CDM software on its own to do that. Polaris just gives you that unified console across all of your Rubrik deployments, essentially.
Got it. Okay. And what's the licensing model with the Rubrik solution?
That's another great question. So we offer a few different licensing models. So certainly you can buy the software outright, right? And like I mentioned, this is via an appliance or a virtual edge deployment or on third-party hardware. And it's licensed basically per brick, which is essentially a unit that contains nodes. And that differs depending on the amount of capacity that you're looking for. Now, I did mention I worked in education, and budgets were always a big deal. So sometimes buying that stuff outright gets pretty unpredictable as to what's going to happen 3 or 5 years down the road. So we do also offer a subscription-based license as well. This is called Rubrik Go, which allows you to kind of spread the cost over a 3-year period, and then upon renewal, you actually get hardware refreshes if you went the appliance route. So we do offer a few different unique ways to get Rubrik software into your environment.
Excellent. And so you talk about running Rubrik, in different places on different kind of form factors. Is it possible to run Rubrik, say, in the public cloud?
It is, yeah. We're essentially consider ourselves a software fabric, even though we do ship an appliance. It's basically just software installed on top of an appliance. So yes, you can run Rubrik in AWS or in Azure. This is something we call Cloud Cluster. So essentially it's like running 4 physical nodes in your data center, or however these are running as Azure VMs or EC2 instances or whatnot as well. So you can gain a little bit more flexibility in the cloud in if you're protecting your cloud workloads that way as well.
Very nice. And, you talked about the Rubrik API. Can you kind of give us a few examples of, for folks out there who say, well, that sounds cool, but how does that help me? Like, what are the typical use cases for the API?
Sure. Yeah, honestly, we talk a lot about our APIs, and it's something, I take a lot of pride in, because during my sort of time as a customer, that was the thing, not necessarily learning how to consume APIs, but getting documentation for APIs and things like that was the biggest challenge. So with Rubrik, we provide a lot of support around our APIs. The documentation's built, directly into the product, so you can browse to a certain URL and find the API documentation, as well as sample code, and even a playground where you can directly interact with the different parts of the API. Now, because we have had that API first mentality, right? Everything that's done with the UI, and quite frankly, even more, that's where a lot of new features get released, is in the API first. Basically, everything you do within the UI calls an API. That allows us to have a ton of integrations into our software. So think things like PowerShell modules and Python SDKs, and then we get into all the new and cool automation platforms like Ansible and Terraform and all that stuff, as well as service catalog integration. So ServiceNow and vRealize automation. We have integrations into almost all of these things. And, all the things I listed, we have integration into. But and these are all hosted on what we call Rubrik Build. And it was in the resources slide there. It's basically our automation community. It's at build.rubrik.com. You'll find all the integrations, SDKs, a ton of documentation, videos, and quick start guides, and basically everything that you need to know to get started. And as well, reach out to me. I'm a developer advocate. We have a team here. It's our job to help push people along their automation journey, and I'd be happy to walk anyone through anything automation related. So,
very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that seems like a big differentiator there for Rubrik. Is the API, the build community, and all the integration. It sounds really powerful. Also, I love seeing the live demo, and the user interface is very slick looking. So lots of great use cases and the different applications that fit in to the Rubrik solution. So thanks so much for being on the event today, Mike.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you to Rubrik for supporting today's event. Check out the handout that's available there for download in your audience console. It's the Rubrik Customer Lookbook, and it's actually very cool. Very cool PDF. Very, very visually appealing. Don't forget to download that before you go. And with that, it is time for our final gift card announcement. We have an Amazon $500 gift card going to Kurt Pyshek from Wisconsin. Congratulations, Kurt Pyshek from Wisconsin. Congratulations to all the gift card winners on the event today. Before you go, I want to remind you to subscribe to the 10 on Tech podcast, produced by ActualTech Media, where we interview technology leaders in the industry in just 10 minutes. If you're a potential sponsor of an upcoming MegaCast or EcoCast, reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And finally, I hope that you'll join us on our next EcoCast event, that is up-leveling your security and network capabilities. EcoCast coming up very soon, next week, in fact. So I hope that you'll join us on that event. After this event concludes, your web browser will be automatically redirected to our events website, where you can register for all of our upcoming events. I hope that you learned a lot and enjoyed yourself on today's EcoCast. I know that I did. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.